You know, at the heart of this ruling, why did Colorado's top court say Trump can't be on the ballot in that state?
Well, basically, there was an earlier ruling from a district court judge that found that Trump had engaged in insurrection, which is the test that the 14th Amendment provides for disqualifying somebody from holding office. But that judge also said that that portion of the 14th Amendment didn't apply to presidents. We had basically the Colorado Supreme Court agreeing on the former part and disagreeing on the latter, saying that, in fact, the 14th Amendment does apply to Trump, adopting much of the same reasoning, but having a very different legal analysis.
But you know, Colorado isn't really a battleground state. It has voted Democratic for a couple of cycles now. How could this ruling impact Trump in other states?
Yeah, I think this is much more important symbolically, historically, and politically than it is in a direct way. Colorado is not a state that Donald Trump is very likely to win. If he is in any position to win it, he is very likely going to win the election. But the real questions here are whether this might tempt other states to go in a similar direction now that Colorado has kind of broken the seal on this. The other big question is whether or not this, kind of allows Trump to get his supporters more behind him with a sense of persecution that has proved very potent for him, at least in the Republican primary.
Yeah, that's something he has used before. We know that. So he uses court decisions to his advantage, too, especially when they go against him. What about this one? How do you foresee this playing out?
I think that the concept of indicting a president certainly helped him in Republican primary politics, not necessarily in the general election. I think actually physically taking him off the ballot could take things even to another level still, because while an indictment and a conviction could potentially influence voters, he can point to this and say, look, they're not even giving you a chance to vote for me regardless. And so we're starting to see that message. We're starting to see lots of fundraising emails. I would imagine this is something that Republicans are going to continue talking about a lot more than Democrats, which might give you a little bit of a sense for how the two parties believe this decision might play politically.
For sure. A lot of this week has been spent talking about Trump, not about Nikki Haley, right, and her surge, or Ron DeSantis, or any other Republican candidate running against Trump. What kind of reaction are you seeing to that?
Certainly, there is at least some doubt about the Republican nominee, but that doubt is getting a little bit smaller every day. If you look at the polls, the trajectory of Trump's lead has continued to improve. He's now over 60% of the vote in most recent national polls. And this is a problem really that we saw back in 2016 as well, which is that Trump often kind of blots out the sun by virtue of his personality, his willingness to say things that are controversial, his style. It makes it much more difficult for other candidates to kind of penetrate and get themselves noticed by more casual voters. I will say, though, that Nikki Haley's polling in New Hampshire, the second primary state, is getting a little bit better. So there is at least some sense that there could be somewhat of a path to a more competitive race at this point.
Lastly, I have to ask, just looking ahead, the U.S. Supreme Court is expected to decide this case ultimately. What do constitutional experts think may happen?
I think that this was always something that was going to be headed for the Supreme Court. A number of different states have been pursuing something like this. This is the first time an effort has been successful in a state court. Certainly, the fact that the Supreme Court leans conservative and is full of 3 out of 9 justices that were appointed by Trump would lead people to draw a certain conclusion about that. But I think just more broadly speaking, if you look at what happened in Colorado, it was a panel of 7 judges who were appointed by Democrats. 3 of them voted against this. So really, this is a pretty unusual ruling and something that I wouldn't necessarily expect judges elsewhere to sign on to. And I think that would provide evidence that perhaps the Supreme Court may overturn this.
Well, one thing's for sure, we can expect more twists, more turns, and we'll be talking to you again for sure.
Thank you.